Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on how UX tools facilitate product-led growth. Now, this is a summary of the initial live webinar that we did a few days ago, but we wanted to provide a recording of some key insights that we took away from the webinar with the wonderful guest, Desi from Victorinox. So if you've seen this before, this will be a great refresher, but if you haven't, buckle in. We're about to summarize some of the key elements that we learned just a few days ago. And we're going to jump right in by starting high level. What is product-led growth? Now, if we were to culminate all the different definitions, it would take a very long time, but let's get right to it. Product-led growth is essentially when the product does the legwork for you. What does that mean? Well, if the product is of value, it will help with retention, it'll help with acquisition, and it'll keep conversions rolling in. Essentially, the higher the value of the product, the better chance it's going to continue to grow through more users and more users. But when we asked Desi if this was true, he agreed. However, he put a little spin on it, saying that people don't just buy products, they buy into brands. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you've been in the market for a phone, maybe you bought a Samsung, maybe you bought an Apple. But the thing is, you did not just buy the phone. When you got into Samsung, you got into their brand reputation, their trust, their loyalty, and perhaps even once you bought a Samsung phone, you found yourself buying more Samsung products. We think about Apple. Apple is known for having an ecosystem of different products that all work together, whether it's headphones to laptop, laptop to iPad. So when people buy into brands that are product led, they're actually buying into the brand's ecosystem, not just the product. What does this mean though? How does it get there? And the important distinction that was made is word of mouth here in product led growth is the biggest driver. That is how trust is established. That is how people learn what your product is. So if you can deploy product-led growth through word of mouth, that is the purest form of doing so. And ultimately, the value of the product continues to drive how successful that product is. We think about a brand named Canada Goose that makes winter jackets. Well, could you go anywhere and buy a puffy winter black jacket? You certainly could, but Canada Goose's reputation for being high quality and extremely warm has created a higher value, therefore even a higher price point. So key things there. People buy brands, they buy ecosystems, and they buy into trust, and therefore the product continues to rise in value, and therefore more users enter your ecosystem. Ultimately, there is one philosophy that goes into product-led growth, and that is essentially give people the free opportunity to engage with your product first. And if they use it and if they like it, if it is optimized and user experience is at peak, they will be willing to pay for it when it's ready to be paid for. Maybe the free trial ends. Maybe you're only making it free for a limited amount of time. Nonetheless, whatever strategy you deploy, the philosophy is get it in people's hands, let the users do the work, let the users work on it themselves. And if they like it, they come back and pay. And we've seen that with different products. We've seen it with Adobe XD, which was initially free for all users to get involved with. And after a while, they moved it to their suite of paid products because people got used to it. They almost depended on it. They needed it. And so when it was time to pay, they were willing to. And we're actually seeing that now with things like ChatGPT, where it's open AI. People are able to engage with it, play around with it, get used to it, get comfortable. But all the while, brands are collecting information, they're collecting data, and they're trying to understand if this product is delivering at meeting needs, expectations, and what the quality is. Without that data, without that information, you're not going to get very far. So free is good for now, but free won't always be that way. And the more you collect your data, the more you'll be able to focus on, hey, can we sell this later on at a price point? Here's one clear distinction though. When we talk about free, we're not just talking about giving people free demos and then giving them access to the product. You see, that is something called product-centric development. In that model, you have to go through a sales funnel or a marketing funnel and speak to people along the way. But with product-led growth, What you're trying to achieve is free access to everything. And we're talking everything from onboarding to no paywalls to all the features. And then when it's time for them to pay, even that can be done without having to engage with a human. Now, that doesn't mean that it's hands off. What you do have to remember is that if you are going to be product led, you do have to provide support and service at all times. If you're leaving it in the hands of the users, understand that users, because they have different needs, are going to want to come back and ask for help and get your guidance along the way. So don't think free means, hey, we leave this alone. That's not true. You do have to come back. You do have to be present and let the customer thrive on their own until they need you. And again, ultimately, the end user will determine if that value is there. And at the same time, it will also allow you to continue working on getting to things that matter, like the end user. This is the focus of how product-led growth works. And we're now entering a term called product-led growth in the end user era. What does this mean? Well, one of the key points that were brought up was it's no longer executives and business managers who are determining if a product is what a company will use. Rather, it is the end user, like maybe yourself in a company, who comes across a program or a platform that they want to use. And if it's done well, there is simple access in a few clicks for you to get involved with that, right? With whatever program or software, you're going to jump right in, because if you're targeting that end user, ultimately you want them to get that seamless experience and get right involved in the product. One of the things that Zoom did really well during pre-pandemic times was their sign-up process was instant, and it gave people full access to the great features, which was sharing on screen, getting on camera, but you also saw them iterate throughout to make sure they were meeting those demands of their end users, which obviously grew. But ultimately, it was the end user who said, how is this going to make my day-to-day easier? Not how is this going to make the company's life better? How will this make my day-to-day easier? And if that is done, by and large, the company's life will be easier. And that is exactly how product-led growth works. Is my life easier? Is it adding value? And if it is adding value, I will tell my friends about it. I will tell my colleagues about it. And the more people we tell, the more people will use the product. Therefore, we're in full cycle of product-led growth. One thing, though, this was very important and highlighted, is that without data, without information, without collecting data throughout, you're really not getting yourself very far along, because a product will need to change. The more users that get involved with your product, the more word of mouth is working for you, the more that the needs will grow. And therefore, if you don't have data, you really have nowhere to go. Desi, the guest from Victorinox, brought up a really good point where he talked about layering data. And the more layers, he called it triangulation, almost making all the data meet in a triangle and closing the gaps in between that triangle. The less gaps you have, the more information you have, meaning you know as much as you can about your product. And therefore, when you have data and as you're collecting it, you can make iterations, you can be first to market, you can gain competitive edge, and all while doing the most important thing, being visible and relevant to your end user. See, data is key here. And to get data, well, there's only one real way to do it when it comes to product-led growth, and that is UX testing and usability testing. Now, what's the connection here? Well, we just talked about being able to iterate and make those quick changes on demand as you go, but there is a bit more to that. You see, UX testing and product-led growth is not a one and done situation. In fact, it's something that needs to happen from inception and prototyping all the way till post-release, because if you are in market, and again, more users are coming, the product is going to need to change. Markets change every day, especially when we talk things like software development and technology. Things change daily. And if you're not collecting data, and if you're not testing to find out the diverse needs of your users, the behaviors, the perceptions, and sometimes even getting information on competitive edge, you're not going to be able to sustain your growth. And if you're not growing your product, well, then you're not part of product-led growth. The idea here is to have products that are designed for people by research insights. Research insights being the people that communicate to you, this is what we expect, this is what we need, this is where you're lacking. You only do that and understand that by talking to your users. Now, there's something that was brought up and I think is important, and it was almost referred to as walking the tightrope. You cannot just focus on one end of research. You're continuously testing, sure, but the what and the why have to come together, meaning you can't just use quant and you can't just use qual. You have to bridge them both. They both have a place in this product-led development system and in the cycle. You do have to rely on both and not focus too much on one. If you have the what, you need the why. And when you get the why, you have to figure out what's next. You see, it doesn't end, it keeps going. Ultimately, it was summed up this way. For you to be product-led grown, you have to be data-led. And to be data-led, you have to be user-centric. And there is your circle. Product-led growth relies on data. Data relies on users. Users rely on the product. Company relies on the product to grow. And here we are in full cycle, full swing. A good thing for your notes there, to be product-led grown, have to be data-led. To be data-led, you have to be user-centric. When we talk about you being user-centric, we're not just talking within your own realms or boundaries. We are talking going global. In today's world, globalization in markets is ever expanding. It is not something that you can necessarily ignore when you're focusing on a product growth model. If anything, it's more important that you continue testing beyond your boundaries, because who knows if the way someone uses your product in one region is the same as the way they'd use it in another region. And also, does your product belong where it is going? For instance, the example Desi gave is working with Victorinox. They have knives and shovels and tools. Well, is a gardening shovel going to work in Dubai? Maybe not the same way it might work in a place like Orange County, California. And see, maybe you don't need research to identify something that extreme, but you certainly do need research to understand the tiny nuances and changes. And sometimes doing global research doesn't mean you change your whole product. In fact, it could just mean that you change one or two things. A good example was the Swiss Army knife that Desi brought up again. Maybe you add on 2 or 3 attachments for a different region and remove 1 or 2, just so you can stay relevant, current, and connecting to the end user at all times. And again, the way the product is going to grow is if it connects, if users tell other people about it. Same thing goes true. Another example was winter jackets. Would you sell a winter jacket in the middle of California? No, it might be better suited for a place like Alaska. So always being sure that you're on top of the data, because you do not know what you don't know. And the less that you know and the gaps that are created in that triangulation, the more room for error, the more likelihood that competitors can get a one-up on you, take advantage of the things that you don't know. So again, test early, test often, test everything, be as on top of your research as possible, because your product determines, or your product is leveraged on the success of that. So there was a last topic that was brought into question, which is what is the future of product-led growth? And what's kind of funny about this is there is no future of product-led growth, because product-led growth very much is the future itself. It's the other way around. Talk about subscription economy going on with everything from Netflix to Hulu to Apple Music, how people are getting involved with those products. And you see more people are putting music on these brands. So the more music that goes on this product, the more valuable it becomes, and so on and so forth. It keeps growing. You talk about SaaS platforms. This really is the future of where we're going with products. There's a pretty high percentage of companies that have already adopted this, knowing that it's leading to a couple things. First and foremost, acquisition costs are lower, because a lot of what you're going to be doing is getting referrals word of mouth wise from other users. Again, the user likes your products, they tell their colleague tells their other colleague, and now you're cross department in a single organization. So you didn't have to really do much interaction or selling or marketing there. Your end user did. This is why we talk about the end user era. They are doing your legwork for you. Therefore, make sure you're meeting their needs. Second thing, your sales cycles are shorter. If you have done your research and you've designed it well, a user should be able to get on your platform, use all the features of the platform, pay for that platform without ever actually needing to speak to someone. So whether it's a 7-day trial, 3-day trial, or unlimited trial till they want to upgrade, you don't want to remove yourself completely, but in theory, the sales cycle will be shorter, because they will use your program, they will get involved with it, and they will continue using it without you having to make calls, get on demos, XYZ, LMNOP. And if you're continuing to test, continuing to leverage all these different dimensions that are product-led growth, and acquisitions are staying low, sales cycles are being shortened, ultimately, what you are also doing is maximizing your user experience. And at the end of the day, that is what we're all trying to do. We're trying to make our users as happy, satisfied, and also predict their future satisfactions as often as possible. That is how future product-led growth will grow. And that is how we've always maintained success in this industry, focusing on the user. So, in closing, just a reminder that if you want to stay relevant with your product, testing is essential. Not just testing locally, testing globally, always focusing on your end user, making sure they're the primary point, and always remembering that qual and quant in this circumstance together are going to give you a more complete picture. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today to go over these main points. Make sure you keep on the lookout for more Userlytics content. You can visit the website www.userlytics.com to see more and to stay tuned for upcoming webinars, content, and white papers. For now, wishing you all the best in your UX testing and design journey. I'm Nick Aramouni, wishing you all the best.